Right on.
All right. We lost Tawana.
You wanted to wait so you get the prime seat. I got it.
Right? Get in, get out.
Right.
Waiting for Tawana.
See what I'm saying about these seats? Swing your feet.
Yeah, I feel like I'm just like character. And it's fine, like the first 10, 15 minutes you're fine. And then like 30 minutes.
Right. Right. What did I do with body language?
Are you doing anything besides this?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a visiting writer at the Institute of American Indian Arts. No, I go out to Montana
So
next week to get
how long have you been writing?
short story, not this one, another one. Then I'm a visiting writer.
What year?
In,
2022?
Institute of MFA program.
6 or 8 years?
Nice.
And what do I do?
Yeah.
Sorry, I just meant like at Live Fest.
Oh, no,
Yeah.
oh, yeah, you don't need the whole thing. Anyway,
That's okay.
Swanee, and then going to
Yeah,
Delta.
I write
I told
other
you,
artists
we
work
talked
on
about
this
this, Swanee.
because it goes a lot faster.
That's right.
I basically only draw things that I
All right, we're going to get
and
started.
this was one
I
of those.
think. Are we good?
Because like, if I put it in somebody
Cool.
else's hands, they may or may not mess up the opportunity for me,
Cool. Hi, everyone. Welcome to LitFest 2022. I hope you're all having a great time, hopefully. My name's Marissa. I'm Lighthouse's admin associate, and this is Denver Noir. Yay! Woo! It's so exciting. We'll be featuring 6 panelists today, but before I introduce everyone, just a couple of quick announcements. For those of you watching online, you're not on camera or mic, so please submit your questions via the Q&A function. You'll find links to all of our upcoming LitFest at Night events in the chat bar. For those of you in person, please take any phone calls or conversations outside and save your questions for the end if we have any time for a Q&A. At which point, feel free to line up at the microphone that we have over here so that we can all hear you to ask your questions of the panelists. If you'd like to purchase this amazing book and have it signed by any of our readers tonight, please visit Matter's pop-up store, our LitFest bookselling partner, to make that purchase. And finally, if you're looking for classes and workshops with space still left, please see the info booth or the link in the chat for our cheat sheet, and that's also on the website as well. I'd like to thank the SCFD, National Endowment for the Arts, and Colorado Creative Industries for helping to make LitFest 2022 possible, in addition to York Street Yards for the generous use of this wonderful space. And a thank you to Shop at Matter, our official bookselling partner this year. So I'm going to introduce our moderator for the evening, which is Cynthia Swanson. Cynthia writes, yay!
Yay,
Let's give her a round of applause. Cynthia writes literary suspense, often using historical settings. Her debut novel, The Bookseller, was a New York Times bestseller, an Indie Next selection, the winner of the 2016 Willa Literary Award for Historical Fiction, and is translated into 18 languages. Her second novel, The Glass Forest, was a USA Today bestseller and is translated into 7 languages. Cynthia is the editor of the anthology Denver Noir, which features dark, morally ambiguous stories set in and around Denver, written by 14 notable literary and mystery authors. Cynthia lives in Denver with her family. Let's give it up for her.
Thank you, Marissa, and thank you, everybody, for sticking around. I know it's been a long day for a lot of people, so we really do appreciate you being here. Because we have 5 of our 14 authors that are in this story here. I'm not going to read from my story because I want to give you the pleasure of hearing all of their stories and hearing from them. And I do have a story in the volume, so I hope that you will have a chance to check that out. But I did want to take a moment just to kind of tell you a little bit about Denver Noir and how it came to be. Denver Noir is part of a series of noir books from a publisher called Akashic. They're based in Brooklyn. And they started this noir series in 2004 with Brooklyn Noir, and because they wanted to have these volumes that were set very specifically in cities and countries, locations all over the world that featured these dark, that's the way they put it to me, dark, morally ambiguous stories set all over the world in these different, very specific locations. So there are over 100 of these volumes, so I urge you to check out the entire series. I mean, there's Paris, there's Seattle, there's Belize, there's Beirut, there's everything you could possibly want. It's very cool. So I definitely urge you to check out this series. They realized though that they were missing Denver, and it was kind of a big hole in their series, and so they were looking for an editor, And my name came up, and when the opportunity came along, I jumped at it because I knew that it would be a lot of fun to put it together, and it was. So one of the hallmarks of this series is that each of the stories is set in a specific neighborhood in Denver. So if you have a copy of the book, or if you're going to get one, you will see this, and I'll kind of show you, but you won't be able to see it. But there's a map in the front page, and it's got a little dead body, and there's a dead body everywhere that there's a story set. So if you know Denver very well, then what's great about these stories is that they will feel very specific to you. And if you don't know the city, it's a great introduction to it. So I hope that you will have a chance to check it out. Finding the authors and putting together this collection was no small task. They wanted a variety of some authors who leaned a little bit more literary, some who leaned a little bit more mystery suspense. They wanted some authors who were more established. Then they also wanted some emerging writers, and they wanted people from a variety of backgrounds. So it was a tall order to put that together, and I was very, very fortunate to have these 5, as well as another, wait, I got to do my math. These 5 plus me, that's 6. My husband's laughing. And then there are 14, so another 8. And I was really fortunate to get the collection of people that we did. They're absolutely amazing, and working with them has been a joy. So I would like to introduce them each one by one. What I'll do is I'm going to introduce one of them. That person will come and read to you for a little bit. I'll come back and introduce the next one. That person will read until we've gone through all 5, and then we'll have some time for questions. So the first author that I would like to introduce is David Heskawandli-Wyden. And I'm going to tell you all about him, although he probably needs no introduction around this place. David Heskawandli-Wyden, an enrolled citizen of the Sichangu Lakota Nation, is the author of Winter Counts, nominated for an Edgar Award and winner of the Anthony, Thriller, Lefty, Barry, McCavity, and Spur Awards. The novel was a New York Times Editor's Choice, an Indie Next Pick, and named a Best Book of 2020 by NPR, Publishers Weekly, and Library Journal. He lives in Denver, Colorado, with his family. Please join me in welcoming David.
Peto Washte, Machiapi David Heskawandli-Wyden. It's such a pleasure to be here tonight, and especially the Avs are playing, right? What's the score? Does anybody know? What is it? 3-1 Avs? Well, okay. Well, then let's just listen to some literature. You know, the game's over, so. Right on. Anyway, what a pleasure it is and what an honor it is to be with these writers over here. And thank you, Cynthia, and thank you, Akashic. This is a fantastic volume. It's been long overdue to have one of the noir books set in Denver. As Cynthia so kindly noted, I am the author of Winter Counts. I'm in a weird headspace because I'm writing the sequel right now. And just today, I was writing a scene that has me all bent out of shape. I'm writing the sequel to Winter Counts, and I've written the murder scene of Jerome Ironshell, the medicine man. If you've read Winter Counts. Oh, I see that look over there. I was at a festival a while back, and a woman from the audience stood up and screamed, "No, you cannot kill Jerome. You cannot." But it's done. Okay, I just killed him today. So sorry, spoiler. Anyway, what a pleasure it is. Now, this story does not involve the characters from Winter Counts. This is a new character that I like quite a bit. Griff Germain, who is a down-on-his-luck Native American attorney. Based in Aurora, Colorado. I'm from Aurora, so what a pleasure it was. Yeah, I see. Okay, A-Town, right over here. I like that. So yeah, I went to Aurora Central, widely known as the worst high school in the state of Colorado, but I love it. I'm proud of being an Aurora Central Trojan. And what a pleasure it was to go back and write this story, and set and revisit my childhood haunts in Aurora. So this story is called Colfax and Havana, which is a real street, a real intersection in Aurora, Colorado. And I'm not going to read the whole thing because we're short on time here. I'm just going to read the first 2 pages, and I'm going to skip ahead and read a little bit more. Reading a short story is a tricky thing because we did a reading a while back, and I read the ending, and the ending is such a downer. I could see everybody in the room just deflate, oh, that's terrible. It's a noir story. So I'm not going to do that tonight, okay? So I'm just going to read snippets. I'm going to try and end on a somewhat higher note. So here is just a little section from Colfax and Havana. The smell of the grease from the taqueria downstairs overwhelmed me. as I tried to review 30 pages of legal documents. I rented a small office about the size of a walk-in closet on the second floor of an old building on East Colfax in Aurora. The price was right, but my space was directly above the restaurant's trash can and oil bin. I'd landed in Aurora because it was cheap and because that's where my clients lived. Driving under the influence, possession of narcotics, divorces, custody actions. These cases were my bread and butter. A far cry from my dreams as a kid on the Rosebud Reservation of pursuing social justice for Native Americans. But I learned back in law school that a white knight job as a public interest lawyer required a trust fund or a wealthy spouse, especially when your monthly student loan payments rivaled the GDP of many small countries. But I'd made my peace with the loss of my ambitions to change society and argue Native cases at the Supreme Court. Now, I focused on helping people with their legal problems so they could go on with their lives. That's what I told myself anyway. After I negotiated plea bargains with the prosecutor, I often saw my former clients back at Las Adelitas or El Matapan drinking and drugging again. They'd send over a shot, and I'd toast their freedom to pursue the American dream of titanic inebriation. Yeah, Aurora suited me. This part of the sprawling suburb consisted of modest single-family homes, scores of low-rent apartment buildings that resembled army bunkers, and dozens of Mexican restaurants, bakeries, and markets. Because of my brown skin and black hair, my clients assumed I was Latino, which worked in my favor. Not to mention, in this part of town, there was little chance of running into former law school classmates with their expensive suits and cars. I didn't have to witness their barely concealed pity as they learned about my downward trajectory from native social justice warrior to small-time street lawyer. The directory panel on the hallway stated, law firm of Griff Germain, but it was only me. No receptionist, no paralegal, no junior attorneys. The only extravagance in the office complex was a battered old Ricoh copier in the shared common area, for which I paid an extra $20 a month, so long as I didn't make more than 300 copies. I used my ancient Dell laptop, tiny laser printer and off-brand scanner. A generic K-cup coffee machine rested on top of some old Pacific Reporters. My diploma from the University of Colorado Law School hung on the wall, encased in a fancy cherrywood frame, a gift from the Native American Law Student Association, of which I'd been president. I got up and closed the small window, even though it was hot. I needed my full focus for the legal papers that had just arrived on my computer screen. My former DUI client, Nestor Vega, had been hit by a delivery truck while crossing Havana Street on foot, and the doctor had said that he might never walk again. The driver's insurance company, known among lawyers by its nickname, Snake Farm, had refused to pay his medical bills or any pain or suffering compensation, arguing that he was intoxicated at the time of the accident and therefore responsible for his own expenses. Nestor had called me asking if I would represent him again, and I jumped at the chance to handle a personal injury case. Even though Colorado tort law was biased in favor of businesses and corporations, Nestor was looking at $1 million case, of which I'd collect a third of the total settlement, especially if the case went to trial. If I played my cards right, I'd be able to approach Snake Farm with a settlement offer by the end of the year. A payout of that size meant I could stop picking up small cases and volunteer for some pro bono work at the Native American Rights Fund in Boulder. I could hang out at their cool office and talk about Indian law again, maybe even turn that into a full-time position if I did a good job at the pro bono work. Nestor's case was the break I'd been hoping for. Now I'm going to jump ahead to a little bit later in the story and just read one more page. For the next few days, I had to put Louise's case on the back burner so I could get ahead on Nestor's lawsuit. I'd received the results of Nestor's medical examination, and the doctor had confirmed that he'd be confined to a wheelchair for the indefinite future. This was terrible for Nestor, but good for me, good for the defense. There was no way the driver's insurance company would take the case to trial now. Juries were immensely sympathetic to any plaintiff who entered the courtroom in a wheelchair. Nestor would never have to worry about money again. And of course, this would mean that I could move to a decent office, buy a better car, and maybe show my face at the Colorado Indian Bar Association again. I felt better than I had in a long time. But then I heard my phone buzz. Germain Law Office. Yeah, is this Griff Germain? Yeah, who's this? This is Colt Jackson. Just who the fuck do you think you are? It took me a second to orient myself to the call. Sorry, what are you calling about? That goddamn message you left on my machine, threatening to go to Judge Stansel. For shit's sake, he and I went to Stanford Law together. You really think he'll grant a motion to compel for some nobody like you? I was speechless. I dealt with enormous assholes before, but this guy won the prize. Look, I said, I don't give a gigantic turd if you went to Stanford Law and sucked off all 9 judges on the Supreme Court. Just send the damn insurance policy. My client has a right to it, and that's the law. He laughed. You really don't know shit about torts, do you? The law is what we say it is, and you're not getting that policy. I've sent over all the docs you're going to get. Fine, I said. I'll file the motion to compel. Your judge buddy denies it. I'll file a writ of mandamus with the appeals court. Whoo, boy, you really are stupid, aren't you? You file for mandamus against the judge, you'll never win a case with that judge again. My advice to you, Chief Geronimo, or whatever you call yourself, is that you stick to your little criminal cases and go back to your teepee. I hung up. I'd reached my tolerance for racist shitheads for one day. I shut down my computer and started walking to La Morena for some good beer and cheap tequila. It was karaoke night, and with any luck, they'd play some rock and roll. I'd drink and pretend that I was on some faraway beach, safe from bigots and deadlines and doubt, just for a few hours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. You guys will have to read the rest of the story. As you can imagine, it gets worse before it gets better, as most noir stories do. Do we want to go down that? Okay. All right. So the next author I'm going to introduce you to is Mathanji Subramanian. Mathanji Subramanian's novel, A People's History of Heaven, was a finalist for the Lambda Literary Award and was longlisted for the PEN/Faulkner Award and the Center for Fiction First Novel Prize. Her middle grade book, Dear Miss Naidu, won the South Asia Book Award. Her essays have appeared in the Washington Post, Harper's Bazaar, and Ms., among others. She lives in Denver with her husband, her daughter, and way too many picture books. Please join me in welcoming Mathanji.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for... Okay. Can you hear me? Okay. Thanks for being here. I read my first noir anthology 20 years ago, and I have been wanting to be in an anthology ever since, and I just got this story in this one, so I'm very excited to be here. Thank you so much, Cynthia, for editing, and I'm so honored. All these authors are amazing, and I'm really grateful to be up here with you guys. So my story takes place in Washington Park, and it's called On Grasmere Lake, and it is about domestic violence. So I'm just putting that out there in case anybody needs to leave or cover their ears or anything like that. So this is called On Grasmere Lake. The day they found her father's body, Nithi's feet moved on her own, carrying her out of her front door and down Louisiana Avenue toward Washington Park. It was winter, and pale, leafless maple and oak trees twisted toward the sky like bleached bones. Renovated homes alternated with cleared plots of land, the houseless dirt turned up like freshly dug graves. It's over, Nithi told herself. It's all over now. She waited to feel relief, but all she felt was the wind, cold and fierce and lifeless, beating against her cheeks. Nithi lived with her mother Priya in a bungalow on Clayton Street that Priya inherited from her parents. Priya's mother had died of breast cancer when Priya was in elementary school, and her father had died of a heart attack when Priya was 19, just days after she told him she was pregnant with Nithi. I dream about him, Priya told Nithi. He sits on my bed, we talk. He still smells piney, like his favorite aftershave. It's so comforting, so real. Nithi's dead father, Jason, visited her dreams too, though his presence was anything but comforting. His form shifted and blinked, as though what was left of his body couldn't get a proper grip on the atmosphere. Waves of fury radiated off of him, shimmering hotly. He never spoke to Nithi, he just watched her, his pinprick pupils inky black, his irises blue as broken glass. Were his eyes blue when he was alive? Nithi couldn't remember. All she remembered was the way hatred spewed out of him like lava, the way his fists cratered the walls of their home, turning it into a foreign planet, a landscape unable to sustain human life. At Grasmere Lake, Nithi collapsed onto her favored bench and faced the icy water. A flock of Canada geese slid across the frozen surface of a lake. A few of them broke away from the group and rose, honking, beating their long, sharp wings against the frigid air. Their choked voices cut a silver path through the corpse-gray sky. Nithi tucked her down jacket tightly around her legs. Not that it made a difference. On the walk over, her body had grown too numb to feel anything, even the frosty air. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. "Are you okay?" Priya asked. "Sure," Nithi lied. How many times had her mother asked if she was okay, and how many times had she said yes when she really meant no? "Don't worry," Priya said. "Farah Auntie's a detective on the case." Farah Auntie was Priya's mother's best friend. They had gone to South High together. "This is good," Nithi told herself. "Farah Auntie's smart. She'll take care of this." Nithi clutched the phone to her ear and whispered, "I can't lose you too." "No one's losing anyone," Priya said steadily. Nithi wanted to believe her, but after everything that had happened, it was hard to remember how to feel hope. In high school, Nithi used to study her reflection in the mirror, searching for traces of her father. Jason was white, his hair blonde and thinning. There was something wan and discolored about him, as though he was already half dead. Nithi's skin, on the other hand, was dark brown, her hair thick and black, like her Tamil American mother's. When Nithi found no evidence of Jason and her high cheekbones, her snub nose, all inherited from Priya, her shoulders sagged with relief. Her first year at Community College of Denver, Nithi took a course called Human Services for Families. In one unit, they discussed domestic violence. The required reading felt like a timeline of Nithi's parents' lives. Survivors of abuse, the text said, tended to start dating their spouses young. Priya and Jason met in high school. To have little family support, Jason was in and out of foster care, and after her father's death, Priya was an orphan. And to have a limited social network. As far as Nithi knew, Farah Auntie was Priya's only friend. Abusers, the text said, often had histories of trauma. Jason never talked to Nithi much about his childhood. He never talked to Nithi much at all, so he couldn't confirm this. But when she read about the abusers' lack of employment, their heavy alcohol and drug use, their history of depression, she thought of her father coming home at the end of the day, his time unaccounted for, his collar reeking of smoke and cheap beer, his eyes bloodshot and bagged. Nithi shuddered, remembering those evenings. She would do her homework. Priya would return from her nursing shift at Rose Medical. The two of them would make dinner together, cheerfully gossiping about Priya's colleagues and Nithi's classmates, amiably arguing about how much was too much salt. Then Jason would arrive, and the air around them would congeal. In her nervousness, Nithi grew clumsy, dropping vegetable peels on the floor or nicking herself with a knife. Jason would swoop down on her like a raptor, berating her for making a mess, for not being able to do anything right. The women crept around him, trying to erase themselves, or if they stayed visible, to be Jason's idea of perfect. But it was no use. Whatever they did, it was never enough. He was always angry, and they were always wrong. "We can't keep living like this, Amma," Nithi would say. "We have to leave." "We will," Priya promised. But the years passed, and they stayed, and they stayed, and they stayed. And that's all I'm going to read today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mathu. We're going to skip to the next person who's not the next person you see sitting there because he said he wanted to go last. So we're going to move on down the line here to Twana. Twana Latrice Hill is a writer, actor, educator, and activist. She earned a BA in Russian from Princeton University with minors in creative writing as well as theater and dance, an MA in Soviet Studies from Harvard University, and a master's in nonprofit management from Regis University. Hill was awarded a Lighthouse Writers Workshop Book Project Fellowship for 2019 to 2021 and lives with her service dog, Roxy. Please join me in welcoming Twana.
Good evening, everyone. Hi. I want to thank everybody in the planet, basically. First, Roxy, who's had a long day and who has been amazing. Those of you who have service animals know that they work really, really hard during the day and they get really, really tired, and she's been amazing. I'd like to thank Akashic Books for publishing Denver Noir. I'd like to thank Cynthia for considering me and allowing me to be one of the emerging authors in the compilation. I'd like to thank Lighthouse, and I think that there's nothing greater than being able to read your story at home. And for me, reading at Lighthouse is reading at home. So I am thrilled to be here. So my story is based in Capitol Hill. And when I moved to Denver back in 1988, I lived at 12th and Marion, I lived at 12th and Pearl, I lived at 12th and Logan, I lived at 12th and Lafayette. So you get the general idea of those of us who've lived in Capitol Hill. And so what you need to know for this part of the story is that there has been a murder of a small-time drug dealer. His name is Ronnie, and there has been a canvassing of the neighborhood by some cops, Detective Delgado and Detective Niedermeyer, who are not narrowly in this part of the story. And Ronnie has a friend named Toby, who is a young kind of ne'er-do-well. And I think that's all you need. So, the pounding at her door startled Lavonda, who was dozing lightly in front of her television. It was late, much too late for visitors. Lavonda crept to the front door in her bare feet and looked through the peephole. It was Toby. She unlocked the door. He leaned his head against her chest. Lavonda pulled him into her and hugged him hard. "I heard about Ronnie," she said, as she stroked his back. "I'm really sorry." Toby looked up at her. He was handsome in an unkempt kind of way. His hair was too long, and when he didn't wash it, he tied it back with a rubber band. His face was long and oval, his eyes spaced wide, his lips a little thin, but they, like his cheeks, blazed red. He was only about 5'6", and he was soft, too soft. His hands were smooth and almost doughy, revealing a man who'd never done a day of hard work. Still, he went down to temp agencies on most days and usually ended up with some kind of gig. He was charming, and that went a long way. Toby pulled a crumpled pack of smokes from his pocket and waved them in front of her. Lavonda looked at the clock, then followed him out onto the porch. He placed a cigarette between his lips and lit it, then passed it to her. Lavonda inhaled deeply, the smoke filling her lungs. Her entire body seemed alive. As she exhaled, a sense of relaxation coursed through her. They smoked together silently for several moments. Toby let her have the last drag. "Okay," she said, as she stamped the cigarette out in an ashtray on the railing. "It's really late. You need to go home to Allie." "Wait, hear me out." "Toby?" "Lavonda, please." He dropped his head and looked up at her through a veil of shaggy hair. "I have to talk to you." Lavonda let him take her by the hand and lead her back into the apartment. She nestled into a corner of the couch and drew her knees beneath her. "Well?" Toby produced what looked like a fat cigar from his front pocket. He inhaled as he passed it under his nose, then proffered it to Lavonda. She tightened her robe. "I don't think so." "Come on," Toby said, kneeling before her. "It'll help you sleep. Just one toke." Lavonda sighed and shook her head. And this was ridiculous, but it might help her sleep. "One toke. That's all." Toby lit the blunt and Lavonda inhaled. Almost instantly, she felt warm. Her extremities began to tingle. Her shoulders relaxed and her breathing deepened. She stretched out on the couch next to the chaise where Delgado had sat and rested her head back on her arm. "Okay, Toby, what do you want to talk about?" He exhaled a thick cloud of blue-gray smoke. "The cops are after me." "What do you mean?" "They've been over a couple of times to my friends' houses. They've even left a card upstairs for Allie. She won't turn me in, though." Lavonda shook her head, thinking of how Allie clung to Toby as if to a life raft. She was not love-smitten. She was just a woman trying to hang on to a younger man by buying his clothes and making him breakfast. Allie could never understand that Toby would never love her. He could never love her. He was hustling, always hustling. Allie was just a sugar mama. The cops were here too, Lavonda said. They had pictures of Ronnie. Toby sat beside her on the couch. I still can't believe it. Why'd they come to see you? I think they were just canvassing the neighborhood. Toby stood and began stalking the apartment. So, what did you tell them? I told them you two were friends. Toby turned on his heel. Why would you tell them that? Toby, it's no secret that you two hang together. Yeah, he said, squeezing next to her on the couch. Yeah, I saw Ronnie yesterday evening. I went over to his place, smoked a couple of blunts, watched something loud on TV. He was fine when I left him. Lavonda leaned back on the couch. Yeah, I saw you two late last night. What do you mean late last night? Late, really late, she said. My back was bad, so I went out to sit on the porch. I mean, it must have been after. Toby shook his head. No, that's not right. I left his house at 8. Ask Allie. I was with her all night. Just ask her. Lavonda stared at Toby for a long moment. If he wasn't the man she saw with Ronnie, then who was? The killer. She shuddered. Oh, Lavonda, what am I going to do? He leaned over on his side and laid his head in her lap, burrowing into the fabric of her gown. If you didn't do anything, I'm sure everything will still be fine. Lavonda felt completely relaxed. She toyed with his hair, brushing it back behind his ears, smoothing it across his forehead. She scraped her nails along his scalp. She pressed her fingers against his temples, rubbing them in firm circles. That's nice, he said, nestling his head deeper against her thighs. That feels really nice. He placed one hand on her knee. She removed it. Get a grip, Toby. I'm old enough to be your mother. So, he said, looking up at her, maybe I like that. Lavonda's mouth went dry. What does he want? I could never think of him that way. She gently pushed him from her lap and stood. You'd best get back upstairs to Allie. But what if they come back, he asked. There's no point in you hiding from the police. Just answer their questions and be done with it. She grabbed him by both hands and pulled him to his feet. Time for you to go home, Toby. He encircled her waist with his hands. Suddenly, he dropped to his knees and pulled her gown over his head. Lavonda's pulse quickened. What the hell are you doing? She asked, pulling away. You'll see. Thank you.
Now you all have to read the volume and find out what happens, right? Tell me that you want to do that, because I know you do. All right. Our next reader. Can you guys hear me? Is this okay? Feels like it kind of went weird on me. Yeah. I don't know if it went strange on me or we're just different sizes here or something. I don't know. All right. Stand a little taller. All right. So the next reader that we have is Amy Drayer. Amy grew up a free-range kid on a charming island in the Pacific Northwest. A graduate of Scripps College and the Lighthouse Writers Workshop book project, she published her debut novel, Revelation, in 2020. She also penned short stories, is an enthusiastic member of Sisters in Crime, managing editor of the Museum of Americana, and editor of the 2022 Rocky Mountain Fiction Writers Anthology. So now you're going to get to do this. Learn more about her work at MuckhighIslandMysteries.com. Please join me in welcoming Amy.
Hello. Wow, this is great. I doubled my prescription for my readers since last time I did a reading, and now you're all fuzzy. That's awesome. Helps a lot. I do want to thank Cynthia and Sisters in Crime for giving me this opportunity, and I want to echo Tawana's kind of sentiments about Lighthouse. It's pretty awesome to read here, and it's great to see Shauna and Erica and Bill and Joy and everyone here. I feel like I'm giving like a talk at high school, but and I'm bummed Ben Whitmer isn't here, because if anyone ever wrote a story for Ben, this one is it. I think he'd be proud of that. But I really want to thank Bill too, because it's a pisser, because he was right about everything, and he is right about everything with writing. But basically, Lighthouse has really helped me kind of find the joy in the complexity of creativity, which is kind of really a thing that's true right now and hard right now. So it means a lot to me to be here. So thank you for this opportunity. This story is basically, I'm going to read a scene from it. It's basically an amalgam. There's one clear voice, but an amalgam of all the women I know who have been basically spiritually broken by the violence against women in our culture. And I really let her voice speak. That's kind of where this story came from. The detour used to be fun. It used to be perfect. God, what a place. Full of women who knew what they were about, and not even the bar was pretending to be something it wasn't. It doesn't take an expensive logo or a lot of light to drink whiskey, and a lesbian who's drinking anything other than beer or whiskey should just piss off. Dark wood everywhere, neon too, of course, casting a nice glow over things. You could see the pool tables and the bar and the door all at the same time. Drinks were cheap, food was cheap, you didn't have to watch every goddamn word that came out of your mouth. New girls knew to sit down and shut up for a while, and they didn't get their panties in a bunch because you looked at them wrong. Well, the detour got gentrified out of the original spot, and now it's on West Colfax, and drag kings, and gray Formica tables, and a drop ceiling in BFE. The neon feels like a communist hospital on a bad trip, and the whole thing reminds me of drinking in the sales room of my greasy cousin Rick's used car lot in Greeley. But I go on Friday because it's Jackie. And then, who walks through the door of the detour Friday night but Lisa Ward? Can you believe I used to have a crush on that woman? God, I had the biggest crush on her. We'd lay around for hours on the couches at the Women to Women bookstore, talking about how the world was going to be someday when we were what? Liberated? What a crock of shit. We were kids. But she only ever had eyes for Sandy Rook, and they married, for Christ's sake. Well, not of course. That's off limits, thank Christ. 11 years into the 21st century AD with the walls coming down around us, but fuck if we let the gays marry. But those girls still put on the whole hetero show, even fucking registered. A few years later, Sandy got cancer and died. Now Lisa's with some other woman, and it doesn't take brains to see it's not like it was, but lesbians are so damn codependent. Cheryl, Lisa calls out. Cheryl Russo, it's been a day and an age at least. Wow, it's good to see you. Let me buy you a drink. You here for the Kings? Who the hell is this old broad, I ask myself. Lisa's thick blonde hair is all silver and white now. She used to have the sharpest blue eyes like lasers, and I love that. No bullshit in them. Now they're watery and kind. Christ, Lisa Ward with old, kind eyes. I'm here because Jackie dragged me, I reply. And no thank you, I buy my own drinks. But if you want to talk, I'm outside. You haven't changed at all, Cheryl. Give me a minute, I'll be out. Lisa smiles at me. People are always smiling like they mean it. She's got a mouthful of implants now, looks like. I wonder what happened. Her teeth were always good. I suppose she knew it. White and straight as pickets, and when she smiled, it did get to you. Time's a bastard. Lisa sits down at my rickety table on the patio and launches right in, because would it have been too damn much to just take each other in for a minute? It would, because people hate silence. They're terrified of it, more than hate it, more like. She's off to the races. It's so good to see you, so good. Do you remember, Cheryl? I fade out when Lisa starts there. Here we go down memory lane. The old queens do it too. When we both worked in the movement, we thought we had the world by the tits, didn't we? I'd just love to walk into Women to Women one more time. Well, I consider my scotch and light a lucky. There were a hell of a lot more tits, but it didn't do a good goddamn. But I do miss it, Lisa girl. All of us fired up like we were going to do something that mattered. I'll give you a remember when. Remember when equality was a 4-letter word? We were talking about liberation. Never had a minute to hand-wring about, oh, but what about the men? We cared about women back then. No one cares about women anymore. I do. Lisa looks back over her shoulder through the propped open patio door at the show about to start. Some baby dyke with an eyeliner mustache and glitter stars on her nips is roaming the crowd, warming it up and urging women to put dollars into a sock-stuffed red jockey briefs. Bullshit. I slam my hand on the table and everyone jumps. Then here's the bullshit. Lisa holds up her glass and we're toasting the goddamn Hindenburg. We sit quietly for a minute, finally, and in that moment, we're back in the bookstore together. Not just a bookstore, a women's bookstore. I can feel now what we felt then, the pull to freedom and each other. God, the struggle was glorious. Lisa looks again to the shit show inside. You don't have to stay out here. I offer her a fucking way out, just like always. What is this, pity? No, Cheryl, it's an old friend wanting to catch up. Then let's catch up. You still with what's-her-face? Sandy? She passed 8 years ago. Cancer. No, Christ, I'm not dumb. That new one, the nice one. Gloria? Yes. You love her as much as Sandy? We make each other happy. That's not what I asked. I drill my finger into the table for emphasis. People are squirrely as hell. Do you love her as much as Sandy? Lisa considers me with those watery blue eyes. There's flint way down still, but no fire. You know, Cheryl, you always had a way of seeing through the bullshit, the sexist propaganda. No one had the insight you did, but you always turned it on your own. I know you hated Sandy, but it didn't make me love you. She pauses and look out. Somebody's got something profound to say. Cheryl, I always wondered how you and Kathy ended up together. And more than that, why someone that good would stay with you. No one deserves to die the way she did, but at least she was free of you. Well, I'm sure she and Sandy are fucking in the great beyond, so don't feel too sorry for her. Maybe I was wrong about that fire. Maybe I can forgive myself for wanting Lisa back when lust didn't feel like a waste of time. You really haven't changed, have you, she asks. I don't take the bait this time, and she wanders off. Christ. I told Jackie I didn't want to come here, and can you see why now? God damn that woman, where is she? Probably clapping at some girl waving fake balls in her face. What happened to us? I mean, what the fuck happened to us? That twit Taylor Swift is cranked all the way up to 12, and it's too goddamn much. I walk into the bar and call for a ride home. The airhead behind it only shrugs at me when the cab company says they're booked 2 hours out. I have no goddamn idea how far it is from Sappho's last stand here to my house, but even death is better than this circus. I turn toward the door, and what do you know? Here comes Jackie out of the bathroom. Made room for more, she jokes, and orders another Diet Coke. I'll buy your next one, Cheryl, then we can go home. By the stage, the lesbians are losing their fucking minds over some asshole dressed up like a cop stripper. One more time, in case you missed that. A cop stripper. A racist and an opportunist. Like I said, 50 years of my life, and it's come to this.
I have to tell you guys that character, Cheryl, and that voice is just one that, like, I just never, I kept thinking about it after I read that story the first time and over. I just could not get her voice and the way she spoke and the things she said out of my mind. It's really powerful. I hope you guys enjoy it as much as I did. Our last reader is R. Allen Brooks. R. Allen Brooks teaches writing for Regis University's MFA program and is the author of the graphic novels The Burning Metronome and Anguish Garden, as well as his award-winning weekly comic for the Colorado Sun, What I Miss. His TED Talk on the importance of art reached 1 million viewers in 2 months. He hosts the Motherfucker in a Cape comics podcast. What? He knew I would say that. And has... we read the room, don't we, Alan? We know how to read the room. And has written comic books for Pop Culture Classroom, Xenoscope Entertainment, and more. Please join me in welcoming Alan.
Hello? I was hoping you guys would say hello back. Hello. How's it going? All right, so I volunteered to go last, but I didn't know everybody was going to sit in the order that they were going. So I just want you to know I wasn't being skipped over. I just sat in the middle. So I was not part of the Lighthouse community. I had an interview to start teaching for Lighthouse just in time for the pandemic to start. So it means that the bulk of my teaching has been on Zoom. And I mention that because this opportunity to be in this book came through Lighthouse, which is dope. And when I wrote the story that I wrote, it has such a strong voice and perspective that I thought everybody was going to hate me. Like, I thought I was going to be like the first author banned from Lighthouse, that Cynthia was going to block me on social media, like I just didn't know. But it's sort of weird doing readings for graphic novel comic book stuff. So what I want to do, and I'll do a little, but what I want to do is tell you sort of the perspective that the character came from, what went into developing the character in this story. So there's this story from my own life. 2016, I went to Prague. I stayed in this hostel called the Mosaic Party Hostel. It was aptly named as fuck because there was a dance floor on the bottom, right? And so I get there, and I'm like, all right, I'm going to go dance. So I go downstairs, and I'm dancing, and there are 3 bachelorette parties happening there, okay? And so I walk in, and a representative from each bachelorette party comes over to me like I'm a celebrity or something, right? I'm not, just so you know. And so, I didn't know anybody. So somebody came. I went to one of the bachelorette parties. I was like, maybe I'll meet somebody. And I go over there, and it was weird. They were, like, taking photos with me, and I just left, right? So then a few minutes later, the woman from the bachelor party who was a friend of the bride came over to me, and she said, she pointed to the bride-to-be, and she says, I can set you up, but it's according to your game. And I was like, didn't you say she's getting married in 2 weeks? And she says, yes, but you are black, you're American, you're a fantasy. Right. I've never had anybody just say it, So I guess I kind of admire that. But there's something about, you've all heard of racism, right? You've heard of it, right? Yeah, okay. So I think we're most familiar with the most violent and dehumanizing parts of it. But there's this other side of the racism coin, particularly for black people, where you're an instant celebrity, right? Like, people are like, oh, you're cool. They just decide I'm cool. They don't know if I'm cool. I might not be cool. I am cool, but I might not be, So, but it's a weird thing because they have these ideas about who you are as a black person, and they're excited to meet you, but they have no interest in who you are as a human being, period. And I'm sure other people experience that in other ways, but that was the beginning of what I wanted to write about, this way that blackness is a commodity. So sure, you can walk into a place and everybody's like excited to meet you, but as soon as you go just a little bit outside of their expectations, it all fades away. It turns into dislike, disrespect, sometimes hate. You see the coin flip to the more familiar side of racism. So when I wrote this story, I was thinking about what are the familiar tropes of a noir story, like detective, hard-living, solve some kind of crime, has snappy dialogue, whatever. What would it be to add that perspective of the flip side of racism, that dehumanizing thing where black is a commodity, where people have ideas about what they think you are because black is cool in their minds. And that is where I began my story. So this story is set in Baker, kind of the First and Broadway area. It's at this bookstore called Mutiny Information Cafe. Right on. Yeah. So Mutiny, the way that I met those guys, it was before I was doing writing. I was an insurance agent. It was terrible. But I sold them insurance. And then I went in and I would be writing my book at night. And so they saw me sort of like evolve from this person who hated the life that I was living to whatever it is that you see before you now, right? And I will say, setting the story of Mutiny and then having to draw the inside of Mutiny, I was like, why the hell did I set it at Mutiny? Because there's so much stuff in the background. Yeah. It took me hours and hours and hours to draw this. So if you read it, I hope you appreciate it. Anyway, the story begins with certain white girls. They try to connect with you by tossing out some faceless, generic aspect of blackness that has nothing to do with you. It'll pop up out of nowhere. Nothing to do with the conversation. Just some random and useless black fact that they've been dying to tell you. Like, we were just talking about music, and she says, my godfather is black. That's like me saying, speaking of white folks, my mechanic is one of you. At that point, they aren't really seeing you as a person, just as a symbol of whatever their fantasy is about black people. In these cases, I like to say something absurd, audacious as fuck to shock them out of that shit. So you're saying you like black daddies? Then there's that awkward moment of silence. See, when someone doesn't fully recognize your humanity, they're more likely to believe in some type of black mystique, which means they're trying to fulfill a fantasy. And I'm nobody's fantasy. That's the end of mine. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Ellen, and thank you to all 5 of you for being here tonight and for reading and for your stories, which are all just incredible and so different from each other, and all contribute so much to this volume and have made it what it is. I really do appreciate all the work that you guys have put into it, and I appreciate all you guys coming out and hearing about it. And I guess we can probably do some questions. I'm going to kind of go to the Lighthouse people for what I'm supposed to do from this point because I'm a bit clueless. So. Just ask. Okay, so like, does anybody have questions? Want to come up and ask questions? How does this work? Use the microphone. Does anybody have any? Okay.
So each of you, like, having experiences living in Denver, what have the changes in Denver throughout the years, like, how did that influence your storytelling for these stories?
I'll start. I'm happy to start because I am so afraid of being priced out of my apartment. I lived in Capitol Hill and lived in Denver when I moved here. I moved here on September 7th, 1988. There are a lot of reasons I remember that day. And I remember having an apartment that was a 2.5 bedrooms with a garage, a fenced front and backyard, laundry facilities for $375 a month. Wow. And I was very happy, and that is no longer the case. And so it's really interesting when that happens to you. One of the things I was thinking of when I wrote this story and I chose Capitol Hill was because there's no way I could live in Capitol Hill now. Mm-hmm. There's no space for middle-aged people in Capitol Hill now. It's much more for the young professionals. The gentrification in the city has really Rhino is unrecognizable to me. And so the city that I moved into, which I used to describe to other people as a small town with a lot of people, no longer exists. And so adjusting how you view Denver and the Denver metropolitan area, and then figuring out what is your home now, I think is actually a journey that some of us take. For me, it's a journey that has been a struggle. For others, it may be more comfortable, and maybe people can speak to that. But I think that the neighborhoods have changed dramatically in the past 30 to 40 years. And I never thought I was going to live here that long, but I'm here now, and I'm just begging to figure out how can I stay at my apartment one more year without being priced out. And so I think that what's happened with all of the gentrification is that we're losing the spirit of what used to be Denver. When I moved here, people said hi to you. This sounds like the good old days. It's not the good old days, but it sounds like it. People said hi to you on the streets, and you met people, and you lived in really interesting communities. And now when I go into Rhino, I just don't recognize it. It's not anywhere like the Denver I moved into 30 years ago. So I think that it really affected when I said I want to write about Capitol Hill. It was about, for me, Lavonda no longer fits into Capitol Hill. This is not her neighborhood anymore. And her being so different than what everyone else is in the community is part of why her life is a life of little consequence, which is the name of the story. So that is kind of where I came from with that perspective. But someone else?
I'll just say a couple of words. Is this on? Can you hear me? Okay. You know, Aurora has changed more than any other neighborhood that I know of in Denver. Original Aurora, North Aurora, whatever you want to call it, has gone through, just in my time on this planet, like 3 different iterations. It has changed so fast, and it's changing again. And I love going to Aurora. And yeah, Denver is changing, and we are losing parts of it. Those of you who have read Winter Counts know that I have 3 chapters set in Denver. And just in the time that's been published, one of those places closed down. The Hangar Bar at Colfax and Trenton is now gone. And every day we're losing some of our heritage. We're losing El Chapultepec, we lost that. All these places that I think made Denver what it is. And we're about to lose Bar Bar. If you know Bar Bar, okay, nobody, okay, then none of you are sleazy enough to drink with me. So you are like all nice. You know, Bar Bar is without doubt the crappiest bar in Denver, but it's great. And there's a fundraiser going on right now. We're losing these little parts of original Denver. I don't know that it's affecting my writing so much, but it's affecting, you know, the city and what this means to us. So I'll stop there.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much, and thank you for these stories. As someone who's a native of Colorado and has family who have roots in Denver and Aurora, all of your stories were really impactful, so thank you.
I want to add a little bit about that too. I did want to mention that one of our other Denver Noir writers is here, Emanuel Ramos, who's hiding way in the back, and he's
well.
yeah, give it up, man, because he's incredible. But his Denver Noir story is called North Side Nocturne, and it touches, well, not just touches on, it focuses completely on this same subject of gentrification in that part of town, and it's really a compelling story. And I'll put in a little plug. He's actually going to be reading from it next Friday night, January 24th at Douglas County Library. So if you'd like to come hear Manuel read, please come to that event. We'll have different Denver Noir authors at that one, including Manuel. But I do agree with you all. It's a very different city. I've been here for 20 years, and it's even, you know, it's a very, very different city than it was then. Yeah. Other questions? Yeah.
I want to say one quickie thing, which is Cynthia's story actually went back in history. Not in like 30-year history, but did some serious digging and unearthing of what was kind of, I think,
Literally.
central. Some unearthing of the core of Denver. What do you think of a question like that, given how far back you went in digging at the core of the city?
I mean, that's one of the reasons that I write historical stuff a lot, is because then because as you were saying, David, like things change so quickly, and like if you're setting your fiction or whatever you're writing in a particular time period, maybe I'm just lazy, but it makes it a lot easier. I can draw a line in the sand and say, okay, this happened in this particular time, and that's how it was then, and I don't kind of have to worry about those things changing on me so quickly, because I do think it's really difficult these days to write a story and put it in some sort of, or a novel and put it in some sort of big present day, because what is present day, right? I mean, I know so many writers who started writing novels in the middle of the pandemic, and they're really kind of now, well, what do I do? Do I talk about it? Is it there? Does it exist? Do I pretend it didn't happen or isn't still happening? And where do we go with that? So yeah, my story is set in 1893, so that kind of removes that from being an issue. It's set in, if you guys know the history of Cheeseman Park and about how it had been a cemetery, and the graves were exhumed to turn it into that lovely park. And what they did in the city when they decided to turn that into a park was they put out notices that if you have family members here, you need to remove these bodies. And a lot of people did, but then there were a lot of bodies that were left, and they were bodies of paupers and people who'd been in trouble with the law and a lot of stuff. And so those people were left, and they needed to be dug up. And so the city hired an undertaker to get a crew in there and dig up those bodies and remove them, and it became pretty macabre the way that it was done. And I thought, well, that would make a really good Denver Noir story. So I wrote that through the viewpoint of a young gravedigger that is involved in that project. So I hope you'll read it. It's called Pieces of Everyone Everywhere.
Yes.
Other questions, or anybody have anything else? We do have copies available, I think, back here from our friends at Shop at Matter. Oh, wait, we do have more questions from Erica Crafts.
One more question. I was just wondering, what's Denver's flavor of noir? You know, I'm just wondering, with regard to the genre of noir, what distinguishes Denver from Paris noir or Brooklyn noir, et cetera? Also, I was wondering if you're signing afterwards.
Hipsters.
We got hip noir people here. We got hip killers.
Meth.
Yeah, that's probably true. I don't know. I mean, in every one of those volumes, you find something different. And the other thing, it kind of goes back to what we were just saying about times changing. Like, I read Brooklyn Noir, and I read the first one I read of this series was Milwaukee Noir, which is my hometown, and that one was published, I don't know, not that long ago, maybe like 4 or 5 years ago. But every one of these volumes, I think they become set to their particular time period too. So something that one of these volumes that was published 20 years ago is going to be very different than one that's published right now. And all these cities are changing. We're not the only city in the country or in the world that's going through a lot of change right now. So I think that Akashic has come a long way with these volumes, and I think Dave will agree with me. Do you want to tell them about that a little bit?
Sure. So I don't think there's a reason to keep this quiet. So Akashic approached me. We had a discussion. So I'm editing the latest volume in the series called Native Noir. And so, thank you. So Akashic published about 10 years ago a volume called Indian Country Noir, which was great, but it only had 3 indigenous authors in it. So I approached Akashic, I approached Johnny Temple, and I'm like, Johnny, listen, the times have changed. And so I pitched the idea for Native Noir, and I'm editing them right now. I've gotten about half of the stories in. So far, I've have agreements from Louise Erdrich, Tommy Orange, Brandon Hobson, Erica Worth, who's in this volume, myself. Some people you're going to be hearing about: Morgan Talty, Margaret Verbal, who was nominated for the Pulitzer a few years ago. It's going to be a really great volume. But here's the thing: the stories are all over the map. The 6 that I've gotten in so far. And I don't know that I could say, is there one flavor of Native Noir? We will see. Talk to me in about 3 months when I get the rest of the stories in. But Native Noir is coming your way, so thank you.
I wanted to say, in regards to what is Denver's flavor of noir, so what is most interesting to me in these kind of stories is the subcultures. Because I think we all experience Denver differently, not just because of race, wealth, and class, but also because of whatever communities we connect with, right? So I write one set at Mutiny. Some of you have never been to Mutiny. Mutiny is like a culture unto itself, right? Baker's like a culture unto itself. If you go over to Cap Hill, it's a little different. And so for me, the interesting thing in reading all of these stories was reading these very specific and unique perspectives of different kinds of people, how they experience the city that I live in. And yeah, that's the thing I love the most about reading it all.
I was kind of thinking about this as well, and you're like that subculture that you talk about, and like this sort of like siloed, and I was thinking about Denver just recently, watching it explode, and we're talking about transience and gentrification and this constant change, and as I think back on it, I feel like Denver, to me, when I think about Denver, is about change, right? Like we were the gateway to the West. We were where people came to get kitted out before they headed to the gold rush or headed up to the mountains or like went to the West. That's what made us. And we think about Denver, right? Like back in the 80s, like gold and oil. That's what I think of when I think of Denver. And I think a lot of people think about cows and gold and oil. Well,
Dynasty.
What's the value of gold right now and what's the value of oil, right? They're both on the decline. They're both just commodities that were, 20th century booms. So this Denver, like, I just feel like we are, like you said, I love that description of like these little cultures, right? It's people who come here to find something, but it's not necessarily to find Denver. And I think maybe that's really strongly and so like wonderfully reflected in the stories that you've curated for the anthology. I feel like that really just tells that transient seeker story of Denver.
Yeah, that's really true. A lot of the stories feature non-native Denverites, people that have come to Denver, and I think that's a common narrative that we're used to. A lot of us are from other places. Not everyone, but quite a few of us are from other places. So I think it's no surprise that kind of comes up a lot in the stories, no matter where they're set within Denver, and no matter what time frame. Yeah. Other questions? I think you're checking the Zoom for us, right? Do we have any there? Are we good? Oh, we have one. Okay.
It's because we're so good at what we do.
Hi. Thanks for all your stories and for sharing. One of the questions I want to ask you, and you can take it in whatever tangent you want, is We all know that any writing that is considered genre is often looked upon dismissively by the more literary types, and yet all of your writings hit directly or indirectly, really core social issues. Can you address how, for you and in general, genre writing has been hitting social issues that a lot of times the more kind of upscale literary writing tends to avoid?
Well, it's okay. Social issues are always a big part of my work. It's an interesting thing with the medium of comic books and graphic novels because all of my young life, they were not really accepted as literature. Teachers I had openly mocked me for liking them. I had to argue with, other kids. You still read those? Yes, and so what it does is, even though a lot of that has changed over particularly the last 15 years, for some reason people still, when they're reading something in the medium of comics, are surprised when something sort of grabs them by the throat and like, pay attention. So it becomes a very useful way to touch on a social issue in a way that people aren't expecting, so it has a maximum impact. Occasionally it makes people angry only because they think that they're supposed to be for children, but that's a very American view of the medium of comic books. So
I also think it's like, sorry, I feel like a rock star.
Yeah.
I also think it's a structural thing. So my last book was like classified as literary fiction. I thought it was young adult, but I mean, whatever. And I just feel like that it's like so hard to publish in literary fiction if you have any kind of minority identity. And so I think a lot of authors who are from backgrounds that aren't necessarily valued by literary fiction tend to be published under like genre, even though like literary fiction is a genre. Everything we write is everything we write is a genre. So this whole idea of separation is just like a marketing thing more than anything. So I sort of feel like romance and mystery and YA and graphic novels are just kind of like open to more stories than literary fiction is. Yeah, I was gonna say I might have just lost a book contract, but I couldn't sell my last book, so I guess I'm gonna leave that out there.
I'll say a few words. I get asked this question a lot, and by now I've used this quote so many times, I probably should pay royalties to the author, Sulari Gentile. So Sulari Gentile is a friend of mine. She's a crime writer in Britain, and her book just came out this week, and it cracked the USA Today list today, so right on, Sulari, and it's fantastic. She says that crime fiction is the new literature of resistance. So her argument is that crime writers are taking up the mantle of the social novel that many literary fiction writers have dropped. Now, not all, but many have. So the idea is that crime fiction, like probably my best friend in the crime world is Sean Cosby, who writes under S.A. Cosby. If you know his book, Razorblade Tears or Blacktop Wasteland, it's fantastic. He and other crime writers, hopefully I'm included in that bunch, we're addressing social issues, racism, classism, and trying to bring that back to the forefront of discussion. My novel has spurred a discussion among policymakers at the U.S. Congress, judges. And so the idea here, is that crime fiction and genre fiction maybe can bring in back some of the elements of the social novel. That's Sulari's argument, and I will let you decide whether she's correct or not.
Can I ask a question about that, though? So, I'm an abolitionist. And so I was, thinking about trying to turn this into a novel, and I was like, how can I do that without the police? Because so many crime novels have the police, and incarceration is the goal. So, you guys have written crime, that to me feels like a really important social issue that's happening right now. So, how do you deal with that?
So I don't know how much interest this is to everybody, but a hallmark of the new crime fiction, there's a new wave of crime fiction writers that are starting to emerge. And the idea is that we are decentering the police. So instead of making police or private investigators the central protagonist, we're centering others. So we're telling a different story. So if I understand your question fully, that's how we're getting around it. Now, don't get me wrong. I love Michael Connelly, the Bosch series. He writes some wonderful, wonderful stuff. But there's a new wave of crime novelists that are going about this genre in a different way.
Yeah, and it's cool to see that happening here in Denver and to see some of that coming around in this area too. I'm really excited about that.
I wanted to kind of just like that whole decentering the police in crime fiction, and just to go down to like one of the like lowest levels of genre is the cozy mystery, right? Which like wow, like you're down there with the gutter, right? If you're writing cozy mysteries, right?
How dare you?
Right? Right? Like that's just like that like cozy mystery, but they do, the police are often so incidental, and who writes cozy mysteries and who reads cozy mysteries? Women. Right? Like that's who,
Martha.
right? That's and like who's the grand madam of the cozy mystery, Agatha Christie, who again, mystery is like the genre for the resistance, right? Like it was originally, right, because you're dealing with people who can't fit in society for one reason or the other. It dwells on the broken, right, the outcasts, the subcultures, right? So I do think that mystery and noir particularly speaks, it's such a perfect genre, right up there with sci-fi in terms of questioning and that ability to decenter, right? But like, there's that whole like the phenomenon of Law and Order, right? When that TV show came on and everything about crime fiction became about procedurals, and kind of noir started in the degeneration of our social fabric, right? And it was the first genre of mystery to really talk about like have that arc of just entropy versus crime fiction that puts everything back together again, right? The contract's broken, crime fiction puts it back together. So I think in these subgenres of mystery, cozy, noir, right, there's so much room to decenter the police and find new ways to speak about like who is impacted by crime.
And this may be tangential, but I tend to believe that the personal is political. So every single thing I'm interested in every single genre, is always extrapolatable to bigger societal issues. No matter what the smallest, coziest, nuclear kind of story is that I read, it's always speaking to a greater truth. And it's whether or not you are willing to hear that greater truth and then allow that to move you forward. I have way too many friends who are, I care about this issue, but I don't know what to do. I have no clue. I'm just idiot. And I'm like, do you want a list? And do you want it alphabetical or in chronological order? Because I'm happy to provide one for you. This is not that hard. There's so many things we can do. There's so many ways we can look at different genres, and they point to different issues in society. They point to different ways that we move through the world and how we bump into each other constantly. And how do we start to move together in a kind of a dance that works in order to make society a healthier and happier place to live? And I think that all of that is represented in noir fiction, in rom-com, in almost every genre I have ever read. And if you take the time to really sit in that, you will see how the bigger societal issues are always based in even the smallest, most minuscule of stories. And I think that that's where the heart of everything is.
Yeah. Matanji said the thing about genre being marketing, and I think that there's different questions. Like there's questions you ask yourself when you write something, and then there are questions you ask yourself about how to sell something.
Yes.
And those are not the same thing, So like, it's probably frustrating to my former agent, which is why he's my former agent. But like, I tend to follow characters into a story. I don't seek out genre as much, but the characters can be whatever genre, right? And that's even like in my reading and in my writing. So I'm thinking like, what would be an interesting person? What would be an interesting journey? And then to me, the genre is like the clothing you put on the story. It's just the world that person's journey is set in. And obviously there are hallmarks of different genres and stuff like that. But then the real thing is when it's time to try to sell it to a publisher, or even if you're directly selling to someone like a customer, then you have to think about, okay, how do I describe this? And that's when I find that I'm doing the most sort of genre thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of us don't pick that. Like, I got assigned genres by my agents and editors. I
lot of
we
that.
don't really right? Like I've never chosen. Have you ever chosen your genre? Like I've never chosen my genre. I've just been told what genre my book is. I don't know if you guys, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, that's sales.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, you
But
look
like
at
you
young
said, you wanna
adult,
sell
and
the
it's
book,
like
you
the
know?
most exciting genre of all, and yet it's a catch-all genre. I mean, everything's in, whether it's spec or whether it's rom-com or whether it's history or whether it's historical fiction or whatever. Young adult is seen as like, you write young adult, and it's like, but where does it fit in that? And I see so many people struggle who write in that, I guess, age range, and it's not as clear as to what the genre is within that. But they have the coolest covers, man. They have the awful. I mean, I want that cover. I want that book just because of the way the book looks, and it's exciting that way. So yeah, I think there's a big distinction between what we do and how we create, and how things are marketed and how they're produced and how they're distributed and put out into the public.
Also, that stuff changes, right? Like, it changes over the years. So, like, I think if you're creating and you're trying to write to a genre, that's challenging because it changes. People try to pretend like graphic novels are a genre. They're not a genre. They're a medium. There's all kinds of stories that can be told in it.
Yes.
It'd be like saying film is a genre, right? So because it's so fleeting, I just try to concentrate on what is the important story that I want to tell, and then kind of see where it goes.
That's well put. Thanks. You're welcome.
All right. Well, thank you. I was just signaled that we gotta like get kicked out of here. So we could talk about this stuff probably all night long, and I'm sure you could too. But thank you everyone for being here, for hanging with us. I know it's been a long day for a lot of people, and thank you to these 5 and all the other Denver Noir authors, and to Lighthouse for having us. We really do appreciate it, and I hope everybody has a great night.